Sounds good. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Capital Budget Subcommittee decision. We will go through the items and turn it over to the Department of Legislative Services. Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to start with the white decision document packet. That begins on page 1 with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management.
And so on page 1, we have the first action was a request for a summary of applications for the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund. And the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item.
And the second action just recommends approving all general obligation bond authorizations and pre-authorizations, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 2, under the Department of Disabilities, DLS had 2 recommended actions. The first was to approve general obligation bond funds proposed for the department, and the second was to adopt a narrative requesting an annual report on the status of projects managed by the Access Maryland program. The agency concurred with both.
Move to adopt actions 1 and 2.
All in favor of both items?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, thank you.
Okay, on page 3, under the Maryland Stadium Authority, the Department of Legislative Services would recommend approval of all general obligation bond authorizations and pre-authorizations. This is the funding for the Department of Legislative Services building, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 4, for the Department of Aging, DLS recommends approving all general obligation bond authorizations for the department, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 5, for Historic St. Mary City Commission, there are 2 recommended actions. The first is to approve all GO bond authorizations, and the second is to have the commission report on the annual project encumbrances and expenditures. The agency concurred with both.
Move to adopt recommended actions 1 and 2.
All in favor of both items?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Page 6 has the Board of Public Works. There are 2 recommendations. One is to concur with all of the items that were proposed by the administration. The second is to add some language which delays the annual construction contingency fund report by 1 month to end of January 31st. Agency concurred.
Move to adopt both options.
All in favor of both recommendations?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Page 8, we have the judiciary. DLS recommends approving all general obligation bond authorizations and pre-authorizations.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 9, you'll find the military department. DLS has 1 recommended action to approve all general obligation bond authorizations and amendments to prior authorizations for the military department, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 10, for Department of Veterans Affairs, DLS recommends approving all GO bond authorizations, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 11 is the Department of Planning. DLS recommended approving all general obligation bond authorizations and amendments
To prior authorizations, the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Page 12 has the Department of Information Technology. DLS recommendation is to approve funding for the 700 megahertz public safety communication system. Agency concurs.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, moving now to page 13, Department of Natural Resources. DLS recommended approving all general obligation bond authorizations, pre-authorizations, and amendments to prior authorizations. Agency concurred.
Move to adopt and see color page.
Excellent. The egg yolk color pages, page 1 there's a deauthorization of $4 million for the Sangaron State Park Yakagani River Trail, Section 3.
It's been moved and adopt. Is there a second on it? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, back in your decision document, page 14 is Department of Agriculture. DLS recommended approving all general obligation authorizations the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 15, under the Department of Health, there are two recommended actions. The first is to approve all GO bond authorizations and pre-authorizations, and the second is to require a report on an update to the facility master plan. The agency concurred with both.
Move to adopt both options.
All in favor of adopting both items?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 16 of the decision document, in the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, DLS recommended to approve all GO authorizations and pre-authorizations. And in the yellow color page packet on page 2 and 3, there's a color page for your consideration, which would add $3 million of funds, or add an authorization for GO bonds of $3 million, which complements the $2 million in general funds added in supplemental number 2. And there's a recommendation to include committee narrative requesting a report and notification when the design contract is ready.
Great.
Move to adopt and adopt the color page as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. All in favor of this recommendation?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 17, for the Interagency Commission on School Construction, DLS recommends approving all general bond obligation and revenue bond authorizations. The agency concurred. I should note that this action includes deleting funding for HSFF and reducing funding for the public school construction program by $9.8 million and moving that funding with a combination of GF and bond funds.
Move to delete the funding.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Then on page 18, this is for the Maryland State Library Agency. DLS recommends approving all general bond authorizations for the Maryland agency, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 9.
Clarity, could you go back to page 17, please? Did you want, or there's the action to delete funding for the Healthy School Facility Fund. What would you like to do with the public school construction program?
We'd like to
Question.
reduce the funding for that. Make a motion to reduce the funding for the second piece.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, on page 19 for University of Maryland, Baltimore, the recommendation was to approve all the proposed authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred, but I do have a color page, number 4, and this would add a pre-authorization for the Institute of Health Computing.
Move to adopt the color page and adopt the recommended action.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 22 for University of Maryland College Park, the recommendation was to approve all the authorizations and pre-authorizations. I do have a few color pages for you for College Park. Page 5 would add $10 million to the Hornbeck Library conversion. And on pages 6, 7, and 8, these would add pre-authorizations for health and human services.
Move to adopt the recommended action and the 4 color pages.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 21, we have Bowie State University. DLS recommendation was to approve all authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred, but asked for additional $5 million. There is a color page on page 9, adding funds to design the library commons.
Move to adopt the recommended action and the color page.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 22 for Towson University, the recommendation is to approve all the authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred. I do have a color page, number 10, and this would add $2 million for the Academic Achievement Center.
Move to adopt the action and the color page.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 23, we have University of Maryland Eastern Shore. DLS recommended approving all authorizations, pre-authorizations, and changes to prior authorizations. The agency concurred. We have a color page item on page 11, adding additional funds for radio tower project.
Move to adopt the action and the color page.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 24 for Salisbury University, their recommendation was to approve the authorization, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor? Any opposed?
On page 25 for University of Maryland, Baltimore County, the recommendation was to approve all the authorizations and pre-authorization. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 26 for University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, the recommendation was to approve all the authorizations and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 27 for University System Maryland Office, the recommendation was to approve the pre-authorization in all academic revenue bonds, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 28 for Baltimore City Community College, the DLS recommendation was to approve all general obligation bond authorizations. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 12 of the color packet, there's an item for your consideration for the University of Maryland Global Campus, adding funds for the renovation of the Delphi building.
I move to adopt the color page.
All in favor of adopting the color page for the University of Maryland Global Campus?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 29 of the decision packet, we have St. Mary's College. DLS recommended approving all general obligation bond authorizations and pre-authorizations and all amendments to prior authorizations. The agency concurred. We do have a color page item on page 13, the authorizing funds for an ineligible project.
Move to adopt the action as well as the color page.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Back in the main document, on page 30, for the Maryland School for the Deaf, DLS recommended approving the general obligation bond authorization, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 31 for the Maryland Higher Education Commission, the DLS recommendation was to approve all GO bond authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred. However, we have two color page items for your consideration. The first, beginning on page 14 and continuing on page 15 of the packet. This is language that allocates the funding across the projects according to the governor's intent, as well as adds funding for 3 projects.
Move to adopt the recommended action and the 2 color pages.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 32, we have Morgan State University. DLS recommended approving all general obligation bond authorizations, pre-authorizations, and amendment to prior authorizations. The agency concurred, but requested an additional $42 million.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 33 is for the University of Maryland Medical System. DLS recommends approving all GO bond authorizations, so it's $36.5 million across 2 projects. UMS concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 34, for the Department of Housing and Community Development, DLS recommended approving the general obligation bond authorizations, and the agency concurred. I do have a color page on page 17 of the packet. This language would add funds for the Business Facade Improvement Program contingent on legislation.
Move to adopt the recommended action and the color page.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 35 of the decision document for the Department of Commerce, DLS recommended approving the general obligation bond authorization, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, moving on to page 36, the Department of the Environment. DLS recommended approving all general obligation authorizations and pre-authorization for the Maryland Department of the Environment. The agency concurred.
There's a color page for that one as well.
Yes, there's a color page, page 18, would add $1.5 million for the Zero Emission Vehicle School Bus Transition Fund.
Move to adopt the recommended action and the color page.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
DLS recommended approving all general obligation bond authorizations, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
The Department of State Police appears on page 38. DLS recommended approving all general obligation bond authorizations and a pre-authorization for the department. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, on page 39 are the miscellaneous grant programs. The first item on page 39 is the governor's miscellaneous capital initiatives. The DLS recommendation was to approve all GO bond funded items. DLS would recommend to hold this item until the end and consider these with the other miscellaneous capital items for your consideration today.
Move to hold action 1.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, and then number 2 on page 39 is the MICUA, Maryland Independent College and University Association. The recommendation was to approve all GO bond funding authorizations for these projects. The agency concurred in part and also requested additional funding.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 40 is the Maryland Hospital Association. DLS is recommending approving all GO bond authorizations for, so $8.1 million for the private hospital grant program, and then an amendment to a prior authorization to extend a grant term, and the Maryland Hospital Association concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On page 41 for local jails and detention centers capital grant program, DLS recommended to approve all general obligation bond authorizations, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
DLS also recommended committee narrative, which would request a report on local jail populations, and the agency disagreed with this recommendation.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Miscellaneous grant projects. The green packet, which has miscellaneous grant projects, House Appropriations Committee, at the top lists all of the miscellaneous projects funded with GO. I also want to mention 2 color page items at the end of the yellow packet on page 19 and 20. Page 19 strikes contingent language on the FBI headquarters project.
Move to adopt the last 2 color pages and the green sheet of the LBIs.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Page 20 also deauthorizes a grant to the Community Preservation Trust. This project is funded in the operating budget as a non-capital grant.
All right.
Motion to adopt.
I guess motion to delete then? Motion to adopt.
All in favor of adopting?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, you may now want to consider the GO bond miscellaneous pre-authorizations. Those appear listed on the pink tally sheet.
Motion to adopt.
All in favor of adopting the pre-authorizations?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And then the last document, the blue one, has legislative bond initiatives.
Motion to adopt the LBIs.
All in favor of adopting the legislative bond initiatives?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Mr. Vice Chair, is there a motion?
Is there a motion to adopt all?
The full report.
Motion to adopt the full report. My apologies. It's been seconded.
All in favor of adopting the full report for the Capital Budget Subcommittee for 2023 session, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Great, thank you very much on behalf of Chairman Ben Barnes of the House Appropriations Committee and Vice Chair Jazz Lewis of the Capital Budget Subcommittee and all the members of the Capital Budget Subcommittee. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this process. As members of this subcommittee, each member contributed very diligently and collaboratively, and this product that we have, that we'll be sending before the full committee, is something we can all be proud of. So thank you so much, and on that note, we'll adjourn. Oh, Mr. Vice Chair.
I just want to give a special shout out to the DLS staff and appropriation staff for all their hard work in putting together all these documents. Thank you guys so much. You are appreciated.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn? All right.
There we go.
Thank you.